Hello and welcome to Tech About Town, brought to you by Communitech and Elevate IP. I'm Alex Kinsella.
And I'm Rosie del Campo. And there are 3 hats you can wear in the tech ecosystem: founder, investor, and operator. And our guest today, he's worn all 3, Alex, and now he's putting on a new hat for size, CEO of Communitech. So we're welcoming Sheldon McCormick.
We're excited to have you in here. This is the first time we're recording where we have an in-use sign.
That's how I knew where the room was.
Yeah. I was pretty excited because I came around this way, like the back way. I'm gesturing the back way normally. That I come the front way. And I was like, holy sign, like we've made it. And it took me about 5 minutes to figure out the switches.
Yeah, I've been, at Communitech now about 6 weeks. I don't know my way around the building, and this is incredibly confusing building. The tannery is not an easy building to navigate.
No, it's like, how many floors is it? It's like, well, it depends on what side you're on, because then it'll be different, and the floors aren't always at the same height either. So
yeah.
And I just want to point out that it's not just you, Sheldon. It's literally everyone right now, because all of the meeting room names have been renamed. And so we're all constantly just trying to play the game of where's that room. So
right. That's the benefit that I have, is that I never actually had to learn the meeting room names in my first couple of weeks because I knew they were all going to change. And everybody else is almost more confused than I am because I'm learning it the right way now.
Yeah, you don't have to convert it in your head and go, oh, it's not the hangar, it's...
Exactly, yeah.
I'm trying to look down the hall and see what... Actually, I wasn't even the hangar, was it? I
no.
don't know what that was.
And speaking of the names, I know, Sheldon, you can relate to all of them, really, because you've been through... So all the names of the rooms in the hub reflect different stages of a founder's journey. So, for instance, there's a room called Blueprint. There's another one called Light Bulb, which
Playbook.
Exactly, and Endgame. So that's the reason why you said you're here. So it's a perfect fit. How are you feeling about stepping into the role of CEO here at Communitech?
Well, it's been a very interesting first 6 weeks. Still immersed in the learning curve and holding on to the new guy card for as long as I can. It's been 6 weeks or so. And so I think I have at least another, 4 or 5 weeks of that. I'm looking at your faces and wondering and looking for reassurance.
I was thinking of it in terms of saying Happy New Year.
Oh,
so
right.
you can say Happy New Year. I always go within the first 4 weeks, the first month of the year, you can say it. And then once February hits, like, you got to drop.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you could probably ride with it for as long. There's no rules. There's no, right? It's startup land. Like, you just make it up as you go.
Well, in startup land, probably people think I've already taken too long.
You think?
It's been 6 weeks. Some companies have already, iterated, had a couple of different annual plans already that they've probably churned through. So yeah, it's there's so much legacy in Communitech, lots of history. So many people in the community have a sense of ownership over this place. And so I think on the one hand, I've got that founder mentality where I want to make some change happen and be responsive to the community and put some points on the board, so to speak, right? Like, generate some momentum. And then on the other hand, I know that it's important to take some time to listen and learn and observe and just hear from the community, what's the state of the ecosystem, where are the unmet needs. When Communitech was really in its heyday, I think the community, when we contrast to that time, the community's changed so immensely, right? So many more people in the region that would have not been here 10 or 15 years ago, new resources in town for entrepreneurs, but also, nationally and globally. So I think it is important I take the time to just get immersed, embrace the community, meet lots of people, hear them out, get a sense of what has worked well in the past, and also where are we delivering, where we want to continue to preserve that, and then where are we just totally dropping the ball, and address that too. So just balancing the founder instinct to move and make progress with also the fact that this is a real community asset, and I want to make sure that I take the time to get to know it before we make too many changes.
How much did the reputation legacy of programming and impact, like how much did that play into your decision-making process? Like taking a role like this seems to be, it's a lot to do, right? Like there's a lot riding on tech within Waterloo Region, within Canada, to really impact the economy, create jobs, like all the things that we talk about all the time. It's a lot to kind of put on someone's shoulder. So how much of the legacy do you kind of take into that? And then how much do you say, okay, it's great, XYZ happened, but now we need to look at the next 10 years?
I think for an organization like this one, you want to look back and honor the past to a certain extent, and at the same time recognize that this organization really does need to evolve quite dramatically, and that's okay. And I think it's totally normal because we serve an incredibly complex and dynamic ecosystem. So the tech industry in and of itself is always in motion, and the segment of that tech ecosystem that we're most proximate to is the founders, who are often the most, contrarian and resilient. And that's, when you combine the tech industry, then you want to serve the entrepreneurial people within it. It's tough to stay current and meet those founders where they are in the moment. And so when I say we have this incredible legacy and at the same time we really need to evolve, it's largely because we're going to be listening to those entrepreneurs and then following their lead.
So what are you hearing so far as you've been listening? Because I like to think Communitech is like the OG of innovation hubs, 27 years. So there is that legacy there. But like you mentioned, Sheldon, we're also looking ahead. So what are you hearing about what's needed among founders as we continue to look ahead?
There's different ways that I could answer that. I think there's, in general, what are we hearing? What am I hearing from founders pertaining to the state of their business and their customers, and just the macro economy. So I'll talk about that. And then there's what am I hearing about Communitech from those founders. In terms of the first, like what am I hearing generally from the founder community? To some extent, I think everybody is grappling with uncertainty at the moment, right? Because especially if you're a Canadian company, even if it's software, at the end of the day, if you're a Canadian company, you do a lot of business in the United States. And I think everybody in the world is a little bit surprised by what we've seen over the course of the last 3 or 4 months. So dealing with an immense amount of uncertainty about what the impact of this trade war is going to be. If you're a Canadian business, you're either directly impacted in some respect, or you're indirectly, but still very heavily impacted because your customers are directly impacted. So that's a really tough situation to try to navigate, right? If you put yourself in the shoes of a founder and you're thinking about how do I deploy capital, there's just so much uncertainty. Like, how do you underwrite the investments that you're making, right? That's a really, really tough thing to do any day of the week in normal times, and now it's magnified in a really significant way. On top of that tariff-driven uncertainty, there's also just this unbelievable wave of AI-driven innovation, and so I think everybody is experimenting and learning from the impact of AI. And a lot of founders, particularly like some of those like early stage folks who don't have a tremendous amount of resources, they're reading about the impact that AI can have on their business, and they're asking themselves, well, how do I actually bring this into our team and into our culture? And it's just easier said than done, because the pace of change is so significant that it literally seems like every week we're seeing some really novel innovation being dropped from one of the cutting edge AI labs, or now increasingly in the application layer. So if you're trying to run your business, manage all the uncertainty that you have, all this trade war type of challenges, and then on top of that, you're thinking and feeling the pressure of like, how do I make the best use of cutting edge technologies, because my competition, my customers are also using these tools, and so there's this immense pressure to try to get up to speed and stay current at the frontier of AI. And that's just a really difficult thing to do for the typical team.
Yeah, the AI thing's an interesting one, right? Because I think every conversation we've had on the podcast has touched on AI in some way, shape, or form. Every conversation I have ends up, I had coffee with someone this morning, and of course it devolves into M dashes being generated and output from ChatGPT, which is a terrible conversation to get into in the morning or any time of the day, really. When you are looking at this, though, as one of the bigger challenges, right? These companies are feeling the pressure of, I need to have AI. If you're a startup and you're trying to get into YC right now, you have to be AI enabled or have AI somewhere in your pitch. Though, how much of that, though, is, a technology looking for a problem versus a problem trying to be solved? Because I see a lot of people jamming AI into something where, AI summarizing emails to me is I get emails and it's like, we're going to be in the podcast studio at 2:00 and Gemini's like, oh, let me summarize that for you. I'm like, I got it. Like, you don't need to help me here. I do see, though, founders struggling with this, right? Of we need to jam it in somehow, but does it make sense?
I think we're so early, in this AI era, right? We're probably in inning 2 of the 9 innings here. So I've got many more questions than answers with respect to where we're at in AI. And I think, with respect to Communitech, I want to bring it back to that question you're asking about, like, what are founders hearing about Communitech, or what am I hearing rather from founders about Communitech? That's a long, big topic, and I'm sure we'll dig into it today in our time together. But one of the things that they are asking me is, isn't there a role for Communitech to help us figure out who in our ecosystem is at the frontier experimenting with a particular application? And shouldn't you, Communitech, be then, sensing, distilling what's happening at the frontier, and then essentially helping the rest of us, come up to speed? Like, isn't that the point of your convening and mobilizing capability? And I'm often sitting there nodding yes, saying, yeah, that sounds like exactly the kind of thing that we should be doing. That I think that's, that could be a big part of the next chapter of Communitech, right? Is to think through what's the role that we play, helping to figure out who's at the frontier in this ecosystem, and then bringing that that know-how, not to Communitech, but how do we facilitate the kind of transfer of some of the experimentation and the learning, have it run through our team and through our network to the rest of the ecosystem. I think that sort of network layer would be a really healthy thing for our organization. Looking back at your time at Properly, Uber,
AI wasn't what it was today. If it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. So how are you feeling about stepping into the role of CEO here and wanting to give back to that tech ecosystem what maybe you had received as a founder? And what I mean by that is, I think you've mentioned before, it's important to have a trusted partner. So perhaps that would be another part of the puzzle.
Yeah. That speaks to, I guess, the primary motivation of why I took this opportunity was largely because I had spent the last 6 or 7 years running my own company and was a founder. And then prior to that was involved in Uber when it was a startup, not as a founder, but had enough proximity to the founding team and saw some of those early days that it was really inspiring. So over the course of the last 10, 12 years, I've had a lot of time with early stage businesses. And I just have a visceral understanding of just how difficult it is for founders, right? Like, I heard somebody explain this recently where he basically said, being a founder is like you're holding dozens of 25% probability decisions in your head at all times. And the compounding effect on you when you're holding that uncertainty for so long, it's just really difficult. And it's really difficult for other people to empathize and relate. And so I hope I can bring that empathy to this opportunity at Communitech. And some of the like founding kind of, I guess, principles for me that I'm bringing to the job is, I'm asking myself, what would I have wanted as a founder, right? At the inflection points in the journey, who did I call? What support did I receive? Because I think I was lucky. I had some great investors and I had some great peers. So I was able to access support at critical times. And I know that level of access and support is not evenly distributed. And so I think that in and of itself, like that's one of the really critical roles that we could play is, being that true partner at critical inflection points. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that's the role we have today. I don't know if we are actually meeting the expectation of a lot of the founders in this region. And it's something I intend to change. But I think aspirationally, that would be something that's top of mind for me is how do we become a critical, trusted partner?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, one of the things people also say about founders is that it's a lonely job, right? You're often alone. You're making decisions. You've got 25% probability running around in your head. A lot of people depending on you. Part of Communitech's role in the past was really bringing people together through events, peer-to-peers. Over the last 5-6 years, obviously COVID really impacted people getting together. It's been a slow pickup to get things running again smoothly. Also, everything's kind of dispersed now, right? Before you had Velocity, Accelerator Center, Communitech. Now you've got multiple places that people gather. What role do you see, like yourself and then Communitech, playing in kind of bringing back that energy of people getting together and sharing ideas, commiserating with each other over things that go wrong and celebrating things that go right?
Yeah, I think COVID rocked Communitech.
Yeah.
Really, really hard. And I don't think it's recovered, and the community's evolved, right? While we were going through a lot of change and also trying to do a lot of different things, other people stepped up in the community, which is a sign of its vibrancy, right? Like we've got a lot of great entrepreneurs in this town who probably saw a need. And I think people stepped up and invested and did build some really incredible resources. And so now as I think about what's the future of the Communitech, we got to take those other organizations and find ways to collaborate with them. And I think like there is so much of the DNA of this community that is, rooted in things like collaboration. And so I think the fact that we have a number of different organizations like Velocity, Catalyst, Accelerator Center, Mix, like I could go on, and I'm missing some that I probably even shouldn't go on listing things because I'll just, disappoint someone and offend somebody. So please don't take it that way if I didn't list your name. But there's just so many incredible organizations, right? They're all doing their part. They're stepping up. They're trying to support the ecosystem. And I think we need to find a way to collaborate to be a force multiplier so that we all are delivering. At the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing.
You talked about the DNA of this community. So what brought you to this community?
Okay, so way back, I grew up in the Maritimes. And which is funny, I sit down in some meetings in this first 6 weeks on the job, and a lot of folks say, Sheldon, you're stepping into this job as Communitech CEO. We don't do things like they do it in Toronto. Like this is a different town, and you've got to be authentic, and you got to have the same, story in every meeting because word travels around town really quickly here. And I often have to stop them and say, I actually grew up in Cape Breton Island. Like I understand how small towns work. Like this is no small town relative to that. So I think coming into a role like this one, I think some of that maritime instinct might be useful. But it's that my wife grew up here in Kitchener, and her parents are still here, and her two sisters are here in town. And I think I mentioned to some of the Communitech team when the fourth of my wife's 5 bridesmaids said that they were relocating back to KW. I knew our days in Toronto or family were pretty numbered. So we decided to move to, we're based now in Waterloo. We moved here about 2 years ago, May 2023. And the community's totally, surpassed my expectations. I've loved living here, and we're going to be here at least the next couple decades as our kids grow up here.
I didn't know you moved back that long ago. I thought it was like a recent thing. Oh, that screws up all my rapid fire questions of like, what places have you discovered? See, I should do more. I don't know why I thought you had just moved here.
You can still ask me all the rapid fire. I just have, I've had a long time to do the homework.
You had a long time to explore.
It just, yeah. Like, you can trust my recommendations if you're listening to this.
Well, I would like to. So, favorite bar?
I have 2 very young kids.
Yeah.
And so
you don't get out that often.
Going out to a bar feels like, that's a recommendation that you wouldn't want me to give. But I do love Arabella. Okay. It's not a tradition. I guess it's a beer bar.
It's a bar.
Literally it's on the wall. I think they call themselves Arabella beer bar.
It's a bar. No.
Arabella for sure.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. If we had some nice weather, it might be nice to enjoy the patio. We have had very few of those days though.
We only had like one.
Yeah.
And I took full advantage, and I was at Arabella, and it was very nice. What's your kind of, young kids? I mean, date nights are still important. Do you get a date night every now and then? Like, what would your date night restaurant or place, or it doesn't be a restaurant, but
I know all the spots. You know, I got all the spots down. I love Public.
Okay. Yeah.
It's it kind of sneaks up on you. I wouldn't say you wouldn't typically expect a restaurant of that caliber in that location. So I love that spot.
On Victoria? No.
On Victoria? No. Yeah, exactly.
No, in that weird plaza? No.
I love EB Street Bodega. That's not a date night, but I just have to throw that in there because they deserve the shout out for lunchtime. On Friday nights in Belmont Village, Janet Lynn's is doing live music. I think there was an ownership change there in the last few months. And so, something good has really happened there. I love going there on Friday night every now and then. JLB. Lucero Canteen for coffee. I know, again, not quite a date night, but Lucero, incredible coffee
can
spot.
Be a date. Coffee, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. In terms of and I have live entertainment, I'm always selfish on this one. What's your live entertainment venue? I know, again, young kids, I remember. Mine are old enough that we can escape.
I have not, I don't think I've seen a live performance since I've been here, but I do have a lot of high hopes for the Boathouse, which I think is just reopened right this winter.
Yeah.
So the patio looks like it could be incredible. I haven't been, but some friends have checked it out. I think if we get those sunny days at some point soon, I hope to check it out.
It's prime location from here too. You talked about AI as something potentially that Communitech could help bring the local ecosystem together, all the different partners, the different founders and tech leaders who are working on it, and kind of find someone's working on something that person B could benefit from. That has really been broken since COVID. We don't have those kind of connections. In that kind of same vein, though, are there things that Communitech is doing, that the community is doing, that are like held to the past and maybe need to be let go to move forward? Not to say this podcast is actually canceled once, not this particular one, but the podcast with the same name. And I remember when we did it, and that was pre-COVID, it was, what's the purpose of the podcast? And at the time, it wasn't really doing what it should do. And now, years later, now it's very good. Never cancel it again. But how do you kind of make that decision, right? As you're kind of evaluating things, do you see things, and you don't have to name stuff, but do you see stuff now that you're like, yeah, this was good, but it's not serving a purpose, but someone still wants it to happen? And that's the legacy of any institution that's 27 years old.
Yeah, I think you're sort of, you're describing something that I've talked about a lot, which is, on the one hand, you can honor the legacy of Communitech as an incredible asset in our community and all the incredible work it's done over time, and at the same time, take it in a different, new direction. Like you can, so that's one of the things that I'm trying to share with our team a lot, is we really should be proud of the legacy of the organization and what it's accomplished, And at the same time, let's not try to build the Communitech that we had 10 years ago, because the community's totally changed. The tech ecosystem's totally changed locally and globally. So the challenge for us now is to think about what do the founders need in this particular era, and let that guide the next chapter, right? So I'm pretty early in the like listening phase and the engagement phase with a lot of local founders. Like, it's been 6 weeks and I've met a lot of people, but at the end of the day, we do have a really large, thriving ecosystem, and it's incredibly diverse. So I'm trying to make the time and the space to get out there and hear from a lot of different folks. And I definitely have lots of blind spots. Like, I'm not coming into this with a lot of answers, coming in with a healthy dose of humility, because I've never done anything like this before in my career. Like, I've never worked at a nonprofit. I've never been like, call it like second derivative to the entrepreneurs. Like, I've been in that seat. I've been in the founder's position. I've been in the operator's role. So I have an informed intuition, but relatively new to this ecosystem, even though I've been living here for a couple of years, and definitely new to an organization like Communitech. So I really do want to take the time that I think that the community deserves and that this place deserves. So that said, I can kind of share some of my sense of where I think we'll be going. You can't hold me to this, because I'll probably change my mind, and I'll be debating this with different people in the community, and undoubtedly all the ideas will get better as we get more input. But I think there's a couple things I'll share, right? Like, I think one thing is that we need to do less at Communitech. And what we do, we have to do it better. Like, that's one of the big themes. Like, a lot of people don't have a clear enough understanding of what we do or how do we add value to them. And in part, I think that's because we do so much. And, it's always out of positive intent, but we've taken on a lot of different mandates, working with a lot of partners. And for the average founder in this community, I think it's probably too tough for them to know how we can support them. So that's one of the themes, is just doing less, doing what we do at a really high level. There's, I think, a lot of legacy in Communitech as a place. And I think that has to change, because there's a lot of other amazing places in this community where founders are working, right? And that means they're at the university, they're at Catalyst, they're at Velocity, they're in their homes, right? Like, there's so many different places where people are working. And so I think the tannery, for the foreseeable future, is going to play a really important role in our ecosystem. But I think we, at the same time, need to be more than a place. I think I've been thinking a lot about our culture at Communitech. I think we have to be a team and a culture that mirrors the constituency that we are here to serve, right? Which means that Communitech has to operate like a startup, in the sense that it has to be incredibly customer centric. It's got to move fast. We have to experiment. And, we have to be in constant motion, because the people that we are serving, like, that's their day to day. That's their reality. So I think for us to be credible and to be a respected partner, we have to evolve the way that we do work here.
You described that Communitech needs to think more and act more like a startup and really serve that market. One of the things that startups go through, though, is my company still relevant? Is the problem I'm solving still the same problem? How do I need to pivot? If I face that and I don't, what happens? Communitech seems to be in that same space, right? Like, it's definitely an organization that has value and has a place, but hasn't really met the mark and met the expectations of its customers for a while. How do you kind of approach that as someone who's founded a company and has worked in this space for such a long time? How do you navigate that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is you have to be clear about who your customer actually is, right? So for us, the customer is going to be the founders and the teams who are based here building businesses in Waterloo Region. So that's the starting point. The next question is, well, what are their needs, right? And I think that there's, from what I'm hearing from them, like, there's a ton of some things are timeless. Like there's a ton of these like timeless startup challenges, right? That are probably never going to go away. And then there's these moments of acute need that are different, and none of us could have predicted it a few years ago, right? Like for example, on AI, like maybe some people who are still a lot smarter than me could have predicted it, but I didn't see this wave crashing the way it is. And so a lot of founders in my conversations with them are asking about, how do I get to the frontier and how can you help me? That is not a question I think we were prepared to answer. And the question I'm asking myself is, what does it take for Communitech to be at the frontier whenever that next wave, comes? And I think we're on early innings in AI. And so the best time to be working on AI support was probably, 7 years ago. And the next best time is probably today. There are going to be more changes like that are going to hit our ecosystem. And so that is why I feel so strongly about our culture needing to be entrepreneurial. Because if we have entrepreneurial DNA and if we're very customer centric and we have a really clear sense of who our customer is, then we should be constantly in motion and current. And that I think is the only way to be prepared for whatever the future of the ecosystem is, because we can't predict it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to see where this goes and continue the conversation too.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be like a lot of like small back to basics in the summer, like getting people back into the tannery with purpose. I think getting some more like interaction in the community, like putting Communitech aside. I really think like more in-person interaction is a good thing for this community. Like when you're a small community and you can get anywhere in 5 or 10 minutes, you got to use that to your advantage. And I've been thinking a lot about like, how do we use community as a competitive advantage for the companies that are building here? Like where they'd actually say part of the reason that I was successful is because I built the company in Waterloo and there was these collaborative aspects of being here, and it benefited us as a company. And I think a lot of in-person time probably does a community like Waterloo a really positive things. And so I think we are going to play a big role in trying to like convene the community again in a way that we haven't since COVID. Doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be in downtown Kitchener. I think there's going to be the bulk of our work here because it's going to be our home. We're totally committed to it, but we also have to get out to other places and be visible there too. Anyway, more to come. Happy to share and do this a few times if there's interest and people want to listen. I'm certainly game.
We'll let you know the numbers after.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Thank you for joining us in the studio. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Yeah, happy to do it again.
I had expectations for the conversation. They were better. The conversation ended up being better than my expectations, which is always a good thing because you never know. Like you remember lowered expectations from
lowered expectations. That was not the case. Sheldon is the real deal. And I know he really wants to make sure that every tech leader in this community knows that we've got their back.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting conversation. We're going to have him back in the studio again some point in the future. We're going to figure that out. Before we let everyone go, or you could hit stop now, I guess. But before you hit stop on this episode, we're going to check in with Alexis Conrad for an Elevate IP minute.
Okay, so this is another one. This is another horror story that happened in the sky. So basically, years and years ago, I was working with an inventor. I'm not going to name the technology, but it was in the cardiac space. And we were cardiologists involved and research scientists and everything in between. They had a really awesome technology that they had worked on for a really long time. And they were at the point now where they were actively marketing it. Not fully commercialized yet, but they were starting to share the idea with investors globally. So not just in Canada, not just in North America. And what ended up happening is one of the research scientists was on a flight coming home after they had been, pitching what they're working on all over Europe. He was super excited. They had a great trip. And this research scientist has not had much training in education, or hadn't at that time, or the information and training that the company had at that time wasn't really relayed to all of the research scientists. And he got tipsy on his flight home from Europe, a little too tipsy. And he excitedly started talking about it loudly with his seatmate in the air, flying from Europe back to Canada. And it was overheard. It was overheard. They hadn't publicly disclosed anything about this invention at this time. They had no formal protections lined up. And believe it or not, it was overheard on a flight back from Europe. And they ended up, the individual who overheard it ended up taking the idea. It was somebody in a similar space, clearly. The pitching had happened at a conference in Europe. So one might assume that multiple individuals with the same skill set might be on the flight in and around the same time, but they didn't. And the idea was stolen in the air. And basically, in North America, we're looking at a first to file system. So if you and I are working on the same invention, unbeknownst to one another at the same time, and I get to the patent office before you do, I was there first. I'm first to file, theoretically, at a very basic level. And more or less, a very rudimentary lesson, that's what happened. Talking chatty after a few drinks on an airplane about technology that they wanted to patent. Done. Business over.
As always, thank you for listening. If you have any questions about how Communitech can help you as a tech leader or founder or anybody in tech, really, you can visit communitech.ca and learn all about its programs and offerings and space that you can come hang out in the hub in downtown Kitchener. And you can always follow along Communitech on all the social media platforms, Instagram and Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, LinkedIn, all the fun things. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.